Welcome to the Christian Bitcoin Podcast. My name is Tim Fox with the Magnalia Foundation, and we are blessed today to be joined by Zach Mahoney. Zach, would you please introduce yourself and briefly tell us what you are doing here and how you got into Bitcoin and what it has to do with your world there in Los Angeles and the creative world?
Yeah. So thank you for having me on. Happy to be here. It's a pleasure. Looking forward to this conversation. So I've been in film and television pretty much my entire career. I started my career pretty young as an actor. So I acted professionally from about 15 years old to my mid-20s or so, and then spent about the next 10 years on the production side of things. We shot, we produced, we edited, kind of done everything you can do on a set for the most part, in one form or another. I mean, not every single little job, but, you know, the broad
Is that
strokes.
common to go from the acting side of things to the production side of things?
You know, that's a great question. I would say post, all of this leads to, basically all of this goes to Bitcoin, but I would say pre-2008, not so much. Pre-2008, there was much more of a kind of a ladder and a hierarchy. You know, you started here, you did this, you went here, you did that. And it was kind of true across disciplines. You know, if you were an editor, and you wanted to do big stuff, you joined the union, you started as an assistant editor, you started at the bottom, you worked your way up. There was a system, and acting wasn't too dissimilar. I mean, certainly less technical than editing or gaffing or something like that. But there was, kind of a ladder. But after 2008, the industry, I mean, the whole world collapsed, but the film industry was especially affected by all of that. And the industry started to kind of reorganize itself. And I would say post 2008, you saw a lot of performers realize that they had to get into the production side of things. So post 2008, sure, we're a ways out from that now. So I'd say it's more common than ever. But there was a point previously where it was kind of a big deal to jump from acting to directing or something like that. It was more like, oh wow, you're making the leap. But that was a different world.
So you've been in the LA film and television world for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
How would you briefly describe what working in that world is like for your soul, for good and for bad?
Fantastic question. Filmmakers, actors, storytellers, like most of us are basically heroin addicts. I don't mean that literally, but I mean that when you're working on a great project and you're rehearsing, this could be theater or film. Theater's a little more pure from the creative perspective, so I'll kind of stick with that analogy for the moment. But when you're rehearsing and you're discovering work and you're carving it out and you're in the process and you're working with other incredibly talented people, and you do a show, you get out, you do it live, you have that relationship with your audience back and forth. And if you can get to the point where the magic starts to happen, and the magic doesn't always happen, you can get the best people in the world, the best actors, directors, writers, DPs. You can get them all into a room, and the wild animal, so to speak, does not show up. But when the wild animal does show up, there is absolutely nothing like this business, and it's the thing that keeps all of us in. It's what we endure all of the pain for. We're addicted to that magic when it happens. It is truly transcendent. It's changed a lot. The industry has changed a significant amount, and I would say that we're farther away from the magic than we've been in a very long time. Audiences can sense this. The quality of movies has gone down. That great feeling, that transcendence you get when you're watching a movie that serves a higher purpose, that's making a greater point, that connects you with some element of humanity that you didn't even realize you had or needed to be connected to, or some perspective you'd never seen, or some connection to a character or a story, or some truth, more importantly, that was conveyed to you. That just made you think, oh my God, wow, that is so true. That is so powerful. We're far away from that. Uh,
Why do you think that is?
Money.
Do you think is it
Yeah.
as simple as just kind of it's just cheaper and easier to make a bunch of slop and people eat it up, or
Uh, there's a great scene in there's this old movie, The American President, where they're having this argument in the White House, and one of them is like his press guy. Anyway, go look it up if anybody's bored. And they basically have this argument, and he says like, the audiences are eating the sand. The one guy says because they're thirsty, and the other guy says they're eating it because they don't know the difference. He's talking about their press relationship. And I just fundamentally don't agree with that. Everybody does know the difference. And it's why movies have persisted, in this period of just terrible storytelling. But it really, in my opinion, it comes down to, and this is why I started the company that I started, IndieHub.studio. Basically what has happened is that all of the companies, there's a particular amount of risk that you have to take when you're making something like a film. You're not manufacturing cars, you're not manufacturing buggy whips. There's no like, let's just get costs as low as possible and reproduce and manufacture the same thing. That's like a really good business model for something like Wall Street, where you want to take the least amount of risk possible. Film is different. You need to take a fairly significant amount of risk if you're gonna tell a story that's gonna have some kind of impact. And ruffle some feathers. Not that that's always the point of a movie, but the best ones tend to do that. And so it really all just comes down to risk. Who's taking the risk? And in this case, Wall Street has consolidated the film industry. The history on this is pretty interesting, but it is consolidated significantly over the last 40 or 50 years. So publicly traded company after publicly traded company gets into the game. And we're at a point now where the CEOs of publicly traded companies are not willing to take the risks because they'll get fired or whatever. And so, they just go, hey, well, we're going to replicate Spider-Man again and again and again. And they have a fan base and people go buy it and they go watch it. But you're not the crucial element of any business is that you have immediate feedback between your customers and the product that you're producing. And the major issue is, pre-streaming, we had a unit sales based business, and there was a direct feedback loop. You produced a movie, you released it, the box office details got everybody opened up, Variety or the Hollywood Reporter, and it's like, how'd the box office do? And that was your feedback. Audiences love this thing, they didn't love this thing. But that feedback no longer exists in a streaming world because that $20 or that $30 that's getting taken out of your bank account, you're not choosing to spend it. It's just being auto withdrawn. And so then it's being siphoned through a small group of human beings who say, I'm going to allocate all of the capital in this way, rather than the audiences allocating capital directly to that movie or the people who created that movie by buying a ticket specifically for that movie. And so at the end of the day, it's the same issue as we always have when you have a centralized authority making decisions about things that they really shouldn't be. There is no direct relationship between audience member and filmmaker, which I'm trying to solve with IndieHub. And the people who are taking the risk aren't really that interested in taking risk. And so what happens is the industry has become essentially a tool for propaganda. More or less. That's kind of where we're at.
Okay. And so tell us a little more about how IndieHub helps with that and how Bitcoin fits into that.
All right. So basically the idea behind IndieHub is that we're not making those decisions about what gets produced or what licensing deals we're going to go get. We're essentially just keeping track of, for every second your movie's being watched, you're being paid out. So if you upload a film to IndieHub, and somebody is watching your movie, we're calculating that revenue and we're distributing that revenue to you and your cap table if you so choose, which is kind of a revolutionary thing for filmmakers because, every movie is its own company, basically. It's its own legal entity. It has its own rights, and you have all of these other rights that you've negotiated for music and for, whatever other licensing you pulled out of it. And you've got all these deals with actors and directors, and it's crazy. Your producers, your EPs. And so it's difficult if you're like an independent producer and you're not like a professional marketer, or you're not a professional I don't manage books. I don't audit books. Okay. So you got to go like negotiate licensing deals with all these old companies. And then you got to like go find the money. And they're like, well, I don't know. We got to go check to see if anybody's watched your movie, and we'll send you a check in 6 months, maybe. And then you get the check and it's like $14. And, they're like, oh, we had to charge you for, this is true story. Like these guys were charging for, file cabinet storage. It's like, why are we being charged $600 a month for a file cabinet at Paramount or whatever?
Right. Because these streaming services, by the time it gets down to the artist, it's like a pittance, right? The actual creators get very little. Why is that?
Very little. There are some rational economic reasons, which is that there's a lot of stuff out there, and eyeballs are split more than they've ever been. The other part of it is that almost all of this stuff is now ad based, and ads generate very little revenue. So filmmakers. I'm kind of off on a tangent here, but when YouTube came out, the film industry had no idea. Like, is this going to be for movies? Is narrative content going to be put onto YouTube? And if it is, will it be profitable in some way? And so, you saw this huge wave of people trying to figure this out, and this took a long time. There were a bunch of shows, that came out, and they tried to make it like YouTube style, but people were trying to figure out the whole model. But most importantly, they didn't really understand what the financial model was going to be. But what filmmakers wanted, filmmakers always want eyeballs. They go, I want the most amount of people possible to see my movie. And, that's understandable, but, they sacrifice any amount of revenue for that. And so they said, okay, well, I don't even care. I just want the most people to see it. And maybe if I get a bunch of people to see it, I can wrap that up into a new deal, or say, hey, I have this much influence on social or whatever. And so they traded revenue for eyeballs. And okay, now you put your stuff on YouTube or whatever, Tubi, and sure, you have access to a larger audience base. But it's very difficult to drive, it's very difficult for an independent film, let's say, to have the marketing budget and expertise and wherewithal to market a film correctly, to get people to know about it, to then generate revenue. So ads don't generate a ton of revenue. Then you also have like 50,000 middlemen in between the whole deal. You got everybody is taking a piece of the pie. And so by the time it gets to the filmmaker, it's just, there's just nothing going on.
With IndieHub, it's someone basically uploads their own film, but they've already done all the work of figuring out the editing and paying the different people, and they put it on there. Do you do the marketing for them, or is it just they are just supposed to find and send people to you?
So in the beta version, like we're very, very early here. So in the beta version, basically it's we're going after movies that have already been completed, that have already been done, that have already done a festival circuit. And producers are just saying, hey, look, I'll put it up there. That's fantastic. Like I have nothing to lose. And we're not doing any marketing. We don't have the capability to do that. But if you do have a little bit of a built-in audience, or you've put in some of the work, or you've spent the last 10 or 15 years going to festivals, and you have a decent email list, then there's no reason not to send them directly to IndieHub, because we're going to at least pay you more money per view or per second watched. We don't have the overhead that a lot of these other platforms do. Down the line, we do want to integrate things like marketing tools, and really make this the best place for any type of cinematic project from concept to exhibition.
Right. And then how does Bitcoin fit into all of that? I mean, people could, conceivably, well, you could just do like, ACH transfers with bank accounts, but why is Bitcoin better for what you're doing?
So at the end of the day, you got to build, all of this comes down to money. And so to my point earlier, you have to have a direct, energetic relationship with your audience, and you have to get feedback as quickly as possible. And if you're not in a theater, or, doing an actual stage production, or there's not a box office type situation, the next best thing is to have that direct, energetic relationship, which is, hey, people are watching this, you're getting paid out. And most importantly, especially for independent productions, to be able to just plug anybody onto your cap table. I'm going to pay the DP 5%, I'm going to give the actor 5%, I'm going to give the EP 25%, like whatever the deal is. You just plug that into your cap table, and we're routing those payments for you directly. And that money is hitting their wallet anywhere, 24/7, 365, anywhere in the world. And so there's an amount of censorship resistance that's really important with respect to telling stories and speaking the truth. You know, if you're making a documentary, for example, that's going to piss a lot of people off, you want to be able to make sure that the economic incentive and the economic structure, the financial structure, is stable enough so that you can continue to do your work and pay your crew and you know, do the things that are necessary when you're making a movie, which are complicated and expensive.
Right. And yeah, like you were saying earlier, with a film industry that has in some way become so kind of corporate and financialized, I imagine it's difficult to pay people well enough for them to really learn the ropes and get good chops and stick around for a long time. I imagine it's probably a world of crazy burnout and a lot of broken dreams.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and then you got unions, you know, that edge people out and take over, and then you're beholden to the union, and then you end up in situations like we just went through, where you know the unions are on strike, multiple unions, one after the other goes on strike, you know, and then a year and a half, 2 years later, 3 years later, you're like, I have to leave this career because I can't afford to pay my rent.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is Jim and I have been doing a little series on the kind of moral and social effects of inflation. And this is one of those things that's kind of a few steps downstream from a system where money can be printed kind of at will. And inflation eventually results, prices on everything goes up. And part of what ends up happening is people's pay doesn't usually keep up very quickly with the price of everything else going up. And so like you did in the 70s, you start seeing more and more strikes, more and more people, you know, walking out on their jobs, demanding higher pay because the whole thing has gotten so wonky and crazy. And, you know, it might be easy to roll your eyes at people going on strike and say, oh, you know, why are these people upset? You know, just make my movie or whatever. But you got to understand there's a bigger system going on that is making it very difficult to work and to kind of pay your bills and to save for the future.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And the other thing too, just to kind of wrap up the Bitcoin idea, the Lightning idea, is that, you know, right now IndieHub's in its infancy, and we're just solving that, you know, hey, upload your movie, get paid, split it on your cap table. But the other key component to that is revenue and fundraising. And so when we get to, you know, a much larger scale, the idea, the primary idea here is that you can raise capital from your audience base, and you want to be able to do that globally. And you want to be able to do that in an uncensorable way, as uncensorable as possible. I mean, it's a gray area, of course, because you're essentially talking about selling security, and so it's, you know, we're early here, we're very early. I have a very long time frame on this because there's a lot to do, but ultimately, you know, I want to get IndieHub to the point where, you know, we all the film business is complex. It's not like, you know, I don't want to say the music industry is any less or more than the film industry, but making a film is incredibly challenging with respect to, you know, organizing the amount of people that it takes to make a decent movie. It's very complex. It's very challenging. It takes a lot of time. So you've got to, where was I going with that? You have to, I want to get to the point where, you know, people's livelihoods are in the film industry. And so you can't just say, hey, like, go put your thing on Nostr and like get some zaps or whatever. Like that's a non-starter. But we do want to get to a world where you can publish things in a significantly more decentralized way. And so, you know, right now IndieHub is very centralized, but it's centralized because we have to deliver the films, we have to deliver the data. It has to be done quickly. You know, the decentralized world, you know, that kind of stuff just isn't quite there yet. And you need to be able to have all the talent organized into one area so they can communicate and they can work and, you know, they can collaborate. But ultimately the idea is to get everybody on this boat as best I can, and then, you know, move the boat over to a new continent and then burn the boats. You know, ultimately the idea is to make this a very, very decentralized methodology of publishing your work, while still making it economically viable with respect to things like IP, or at least just saying, hey, I'm getting paid when people are watching it. If we can remove the central intermediaries with respect to financing and revenue, and we can create a technology where filmmakers can publish without having to do any of that in a relatively decentralized way, while still maintaining some sort of exclusivity over revenue and rights. That's the ultimate idea here, and that's going to take That's going to take a long time. But so for now, we're kind of just the
course.
old model subscriptions, and then but Bitcoin. The point is that it has to be built on Bitcoin in order to get to that point, and so you have to start it at the the earliest phase, I think.
Right. Let's transition to zooming out some more. You've been chewing a lot lately on this idea of living in the information age, and now, especially with AI and everything and the internet, we're just drowning in information way more than anyone could ever possibly consume. And you were telling me that you think what's even more valuable is discernment. Describe briefly kind of what you mean by this shift from the age of information to the age of discernment. And then let's talk a little more about art and creativity and AI and how all this intersects with your world.
Sounds great. Yeah, I don't know. It's just an idea that sort of struck me one day. Probably too much Twitter browsing, like I wasn't on social for a long time. I avoided it like the plague. And then I produced a podcast. And so we needed to be, it was a kind of a political podcast. We were talking about a lot of the stuff that's blown up lately, but this was years ago. And so we got it, you had to be like tapped in and
engaged,
paying attention. So I had to do it for that reason. But then what really got me sucked into social was the crypto world. So in 2017, I stumbled into this technology, and at the time it was so much fun, man. Like the arguments, the debates, the conversations, the people you would meet, like everybody's trying to figure out this tech and everybody's arguing, and a lot of people are having great, just wonderful conversations in good faith. I can't even tell you how many fantastic conversations I had on forums and social, just like random people I've never met, will probably never connect with again. No idea who they were, but genuine, earnest conversation with the objective of sussing out what was true. We're trying to figure out what technology is the best, or why they're the best, or what works or what doesn't work, or what money is in the first place. And so my point is the whole objective of sussing through Twitter or whatever social or whatever forum or whatever board, you're trying to figure out what is right, what is true. And at some point I realized, and then that wave kind of dies down, like right now I'd say we're kind of in a dry period. Like maybe, the conversation's better on Nostr for sure, but we're kind of in this dry period of everybody's just sort of waiting for Bitcoin to go up, and we're not having these cool arguments about it anymore, and the philosophical debates and everybody learning about it. It was this very magical time. And so now it's just it's so much nonsense. And I find myself, I've built this bad habit of scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, but somewhere back there, I'm still trying to do this filter of okay, nonsense. Oh, that seems interesting. That's true. And so the whole objective ultimately, right? Ultimately our survival depends on this. What is real? What is happening? I have to align myself with it as quickly as I can, really, or you're going to be at a significant disadvantage. But never before in history have we just been, it's like Clockwork Orange, it's like 1984, your eyes are peeled, but we're doing it to ourselves. They're not even doing it. We're just willingly derping this phone. And it's just so much information. I know we all know this, but it's just outrageous how many thoughts go through your head that aren't your idea as you're reading these posts. That's not your voice. That's not your connection to God. That's not organic in any way. That you're just brainwashing yourself. But if you're on a mission for something, if you're trying to find something out, it's a powerful tool. You have to be able to figure out what is right and what is true. And I know that's that's a big statement. It's maybe an impossible task. Maybe do I think that human beings are capable of knowing the truth in totality? No, I don't. We don't have the bandwidth. We'd explode. Right. From an intellectual perspective, maybe. But there's something in our heart where we go, that rings true. When we hear something that's true, it's like we're being reminded of something we already know. So anyway, all that's to say that it's just drowning and drowning and drowning information. And so I realized, okay, well, what's the most valuable thing that you can do in a situation where you're drowning in this information? Learn how to swim. We have to be able to discern what is right and what is wrong. And if we don't have the ability to discern what is wrong in this situation where we're being blasted with information, you're not going to last long, spiritually, physically, or otherwise.
Right. Yeah. No, I've been chewing on that lately too, something like that, because I think I mean, your word discernment is a really good one. This kind of having to choose and kind of distinguish between what's worth paying attention to and what's not. Because, yeah, constantly all day long, even apart from the internet, you are constantly being bombarded with all kinds of inputs and information, and you automatically ignore most of it. And that's just part of having a functional mind and nervous system and soul. But that becomes especially the case when you are actually dealing with just nonstop kind of fire hose of words and of information. And, it's quite obvious that we are not constituted to handle that. And it's overwhelming and it's stressful and it is not helping people. But like you said, we can't stop ourselves. And, of course, all these things are not entirely innocent in how they are designed. They are designed to suck you in and to keep you going and it's typically not by things that are happy and nice and true and good and beautiful that really get people wound up. It's the things that make them really angry. It's the things that, make them jealous, that it gets pretty dark pretty fast. And I just finished reading The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt about kids and smartphones and, what happened with handing smartphones to 10-year-olds and how much this has affected us and how it's changed childhood and how parenting has changed so much. People are, simultaneously overly stressed out and obsessed with keeping their kids safe from physical dangers like falling off a playground or getting abducted by strangers. They're way more cautious about it than they really should be compared to the actual risk.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they are way too undercautious on where things are much more dangerous in terms of the damage that social media is causing, especially to girls, and the kinds of people that are on the internet prowling around for kids. And so, yeah, it's just this crazy thing. But I think a close synonym to your word for discernment would be wisdom. This biblical idea. And again, it's not limited to the Bible. When the Bible talks about wisdom, it is often pointing to things that you don't need to have the Bible to figure out. You don't have to be a Christian to learn all kinds of wise things. The book of Proverbs in the Old Testament, much of it is explicitly, copied from Egyptian wisdom sources, or from things from the ancient Near East. These, and a lot of it is kind of basic and kind of obvious. Hey, if you, don't sleep in all the time and you work hard, generally things will work out better for you than if you are really lazy and you assume that everyone else is going to do everything for you and you don't want to learn how to do any hard work. That is pretty obvious. You don't need a Bible handed to you to figure that out. But one of the things that Scripture emphasizes over and over and over again is that wisdom is not something hanging out there on its own or existing by itself. And kind of like you said, it's certainly not something that we come up with ourselves. It's not something that's crowdsourced. Wisdom is ultimately from God, and it points to God, and it's meant to lead us to Him. So that, Proverbs says over and over again, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Is to revere God and to know God and to walk with Him in respect of the world that He's made, not me making it up as I go along. And like you said, reality and truth are things that I am meant to conform myself to.
Yes.
Not how do I conform reality to myself and what I want. That, according to Scripture and lots of examples through history and lots of people we know, that is the recipe for disaster. It may be delayed, but you destroy yourself by trying to force everything into your own mold.
100%.
How do you with like AI and all this stuff? I mean, I don't do a ton of writing, but as a pastor, you do a decent amount of creative work, especially writing sermons and things like that. Writing reflections on different things I'm reading, writing emails to people, writing letters, those kinds of things. I had something of a crisis a few months ago thinking about AI and almost kind of like, well, what's even the point? If all this stuff just gets kind of uploaded into the internet and just, churned out by these AI machines, is there any point to creating anything? What would you say to those who are feeling despairing about the ability of these tools to create things, in a way, I guess, that are not great, but are enough for a lot of people? I've heard things about, this is going to transform film. When the technology catches up, we're going to be able to just plug in some prompts and you can make your own awesome movies or video games or whatever. How do you navigate through that, being in a world of creativity? And how do you think about these things?
It's it is a significant challenge. I mean, there's no question that AI is the real deal. There's no question that it is going to fundamentally change. If not, it'll fundamentally change the way that we do things. I'm not sure if it fundamentally changes the reason that we do things. And so, just first of all, AI with respect to making movies is like so much closer than people realize. Like we are so close to not being able to tell the difference between was that actually Brad Pitt doing that, or was it just manipulated? Like, we're extremely close to this. Now, that being said, I stumbled across this thread the other day that was like, a talent agency a couple agencies are fighting over signing the first like AI actress. And at first, of course, I was like, oh God, but if you really think about what they're signing, they're signing the group of people who have prompted this AI into the level of specificity that it makes this character interesting. So when you're acting, when you're doing a performance, your job, you basically have a couple of jobs. One is to tell the truth. A lot of people think acting is about lying, but it's not. The best definition of acting I ever heard was that you're behaving truthfully under imaginary circumstances. Your job is to be as honest and as truthful as possible. And if you're not truthful or honest, we call that bad acting. And everybody goes, I don't believe you. And the secret to convincing people that you're going through the emotion that you're going through, or is not to lie about it. It's to actually go through the thing, right? Like to truly go through this experience. Which is why people pay, actors a bunch of money to sit in a dark room and cathartically go through the emotions that they can't really go through themselves in their own lives. So tell the truth, number one. Now this is good acting, not bad acting, of course. So you got to tell the truth, but the greatest tool an actor has is specificity. Your job is to be as specific as you possibly can in every choice that you make. Insane levels of specificity. And that's really what your job is. That's what you're hired to do. Meisner said your talent lies in your choices. And so if you look at AI from the perspective of specificity and prompting, it's actually not that dissimilar from somebody writing a screenplay, somebody, working on a movie, somebody coming up with a shot list, a DP and a director sitting down. You're being hyper specific about every single thing that you're doing, how you want the camera to move, at what point do you want somebody to enter the frame, where is their eye exactly on this frame, like I'm every little minute detail. And so in some sense, it's still a human being who is, in my opinion, basically what artists are doing is they're able to they get themselves out of the way. They're able to channel something from this Akashic realm, this realm of information, this ethereal realm, and they're able to bring it into physical being. And so in that sense, it's really not all that different. The tools are different. The output's a little bit different. But it still requires a tremendous amount of specificity, and it still requires a lot of talent. And what it's going to do, so if the pile of, terrible movies at the bottom continues to grow and grow and grow, well, the cream is always going to rise, and it's going to make people appreciate the great stuff that much more. And so I think that we're going to go through this explosion, and this is going to take a while. We're going to go the industry doesn't know what's happening. We are in the infancy of this. We're not even singing the national anthem yet. Like, we're still in the parking lot drinking beers. Like, no one knows what's going on. And so it's going to take a long time for this to settle and to figure out my point about the reason you do things and then the how you do things. I think the reasons are still going to persist. I think the reasons that human beings tell stories, like, that's not going anywhere. But the how is going to change dramatically. To be honest, I'm not sure. I think that the industry is going to split. I think that you're going to have a different genre. You're going to call it classical cinema, where it's like old school camera, actors, movies, and then you're going to have this whole other thing, which is really just more of a visual experience.
And would the latter kind of just be for most people, just kind of want to be entertained? There's the people that are happy to watch the 7th sequel to Spider-Man. To them, it's not any really big difference. They don't really care. It's just interesting and cool.
Yeah.
Whereas classic cinema would be like people maybe who are hungry for something that's more authentic or more creative, or because from what I understand, a lot of the AI stuff is it's only limited to what it has in front of it, and it's incapable of kind of stretching the limits or going beyond. It can just kind of sit there and churn and recreate kind of whatever you tell it or what's already there. Am I on the right track?
I think so. I do. I think you're going to have a bifurcation of the market where you're going to have people who are really interested in the point of the movie and going through the human experience. And I would say, I would go so far as to say this, like, I mean, let's just rewind. Not that long ago. Remember what it was like to be bored? Like, we're so in the infancy of the internet here. Like, it's just mind blowing. Like, it feels like it's been a long time, but like it hasn't. It's been like a half of a fraction of a moment. Like, we're so early. But back in the day, you'd be bored. You'd be at home. Okay, we had TV for sure, but like, like, what did you do? Like, I'm gonna play some cards. I'm gonna play a card game. I'm gonna like meander around. I'll just clean. Like, human beings had this energy of like, I gotta like do something. I'm bored. And it manifests in a lot of different ways, And I was thinking about this the other day. I was teaching my wife how to play cribbage. It's like old card game. And just going back to what that felt like when you're just like sitting at the kitchen table with your family or by yourself and just like nothing to do. And how the part about going to the movies that was so fun about movies wasn't just the movie. It was a thing to do. You got out of the house, you got dressed, you picked the movie, you got the snacks, you sat in the dark room, you laughed with other human beings, and you got out. Let's say it was a later show, you got out at 10 o'clock, you got to kind of meander to your car, you thought about the movie, you thought about what it meant, how it impacted your life, what it was, relevant to, and then you went home, you went to bed. It was a way it was a very structured way to not be bored. And there were only so many ways to not be bored back in the day. Like, you had your job, you could only clean your house so well. If you had kids and a big family, okay, like, obviously that keeps you very busy. But it was like books, music, movies, magazines, or like some weird, hobby you might have. The point I'm trying to make is that I think that movies satisfied that boredom for a lot of people. And I think maybe even back then, a lot of people didn't really care. They knew the difference between a good and a bad movie, but they just needed to do something. I think that social media and I think that phones are occupying a significant portion. Video games do this too. A significant portion of the population who are just like bored and need to be occupied by something. Maybe movies aren't really the thing they ever really cared about anyway, but it was something to do and your friends went and did it. And so you went and did it anyway. So I think that we're just going to see a massive bifurcation into whole other industries, whether it's, look, things are visual, of course, like you're doing a camera when you're listening to a podcast, but a podcast is on a movie. These are very different things, even though they're both using the same technology. So I think that we'll probably have a smaller market in films, but ideally a more motivated and deeply excited market, people who really, really just love movies. But then AI, I would say that I think that AI is going to wreck the commercial industry, first and foremost. Narrative film is a little more challenging because it's so hard to put together a convoluted, complex idea and like pull it off and make it really good. But like doing a commercial, like you don't, like, if you don't need actors, don't hire them. Like it's a bad marketing firm writing bad dialogue anyway. And you just needed a meat prop in there to like do the thing. So I think that AI is going to like wreck the commercial industry from a production perspective. And the commercial industry used to be massive. That was most people's bread and butter. Cinematographers, gaffers, actors, everybody. It was like commercials. It was just a good way to make a bunch of money, pretty easy, pretty quick, and they were constantly churning them out. I think the commercial industry is in trouble. I think that video games have really blurred the line between cinema and games.
Right.
Especially over the last few years. I mean, they're hiring Roger Deakins to be the visual advisor on video games. So he's basically doing a movie, he's a great DP. But if you have an AI, an algorithm that can generate the environment in the video game and make it seem organic and novel and interesting, like a new level or the same level with just like a different load every time, kind of like Diablo, or a game that can generate a new script and new characters and new interesting things, like NPCs can now have AI driven dialogue that's much more organic and interesting, and it's not the same thing every time. Like in Skyrim, you go talk to the guard and he says the same thing every time. I think that it's going to change those things I think those are just ripe for disruption, and it kind of makes sense in those contexts. I think film is a little bit more of a question mark. Um, it will be impacted. It's going to be impacted. There's no question. But I do think that we're going to see a bifurcation.
Right. Well, and I mean, I'm not Mr. Art scholar, but what you were saying earlier about people, the basic reasons people tell stories and they create, I think you're right that is just a function of who we are as God's creatures. You know, in Christian terms, we would say, well, that's because we are His image bearers. God is the creator, and part of what it means to be made in His image as humans is that we also are creators in a subway. And so, yeah, it is normal and natural for people to just make things and to tell stories. I heard a guy one time talking about he was distinguishing between folk art and pop art. He was talking about, pop art, maybe this is too simplistic, but he said, it's mainly a commercial endeavor. It's to make money. It's to sell something. Folk art can be, funny, just as serious, just as farcical, but it was something a little more organic and it was a little more anonymous, where it has kind of been passed down through the ages and maybe modified a little bit. But I don't know. I mean, I've been doing, we homeschool our kids, and we are doing a unit on the Middle Ages right now. And I'm supposed to be presenting kind of medieval poetry to them and medieval music. And so I'm out there trying to find stuff. And so I've, and it's some of this stuff's so old, it's hard to find actual musical settings of it, in terms of the notation. Musical notation is a relatively recent invention. But, some of these things, and so we've listened to some of these songs where they're pretty sure this is how it would have been sung and what it sounded like, and here's the instruments. And it's like, they're fun and they're interesting and they're quirky, like a lot of poetry, and I'm guessing like a lot of films, if you kind of interrogated the creator and you said, well, what is this about? What's the point of it? It would probably be something relatively simple and straightforward. But, the point of poetry or of art is not to distill it down to the one sentence summary of what it's all about. You've kind of just killed it by demanding that and getting to that point. The point is the experience. The point is kind of what it draws you into. But, if you would have gone in the 1300s to this guy who wrote this poem and this song about how great it is that springtime's here and all the animals are dancing around because they're so happy, it's so wonderful that winter's over. And you would have asked him, well, why are you doing this? Why are you writing this poem? What's the point of this song? You probably would have gotten the same kind of response that you would get from a little kid playing a board game or, playing cribbage. Why are you doing that? What's the point of that? They'd say, well, what do you mean? I'm just doing it. I'm playing. It's almost like adults don't really stop playing. Like their form of play is creativity. And the point of it is that it is its own point. You know what I mean? Am I on the right track about kind of what is creativity really about? If we remove the kind of financial commercial equation from it, why do we do this?
I think so. I think that I think a significant part of this is that we are social creatures to the very, very core of our being. And Jordan Peterson had this wasn't really his point. I'm just sort of hijacking it in the context of this, but he had an interesting point in one of the billion hours of talking he's done, where he's talking about, we all have something that we're totally helplessly insane about. And we need our community and our family and our friends to just like prop us up and just like take care of us when we've like lost it within the context of this one thing. And we do the same thing for them. Like we're totally functional except for this one thing, and we're just gone. and we need a community to hold each other up in those moments. And I think that creativity, I actually want to get into this with you. We'll come back to that. The word creativity itself kind of bugs me, but I think ultimately a lot of creative, quote unquote creative endeavors are: music, painting, poems, film, dancing, acting. It's a way to connect and express with one another. Our feelings and our emotions and our reality becomes real when someone else receives it. And that reception of our experience is what makes the experience valid in the first place. And I don't think that human beings can escape that at all. It is so deeply ingrained in this brain of ours. And so I think a lot of that is really just a way to, here's my experience and here's my story. And most of these things are emotional. They're not intellectual. Like there's a big difference between saying, "Yay, it's springtime," and and the sun is out.
I'm not so cold. It's nice to not be so cold.
Right?
It's like, well, okay,
right. But that doesn't really get to the experience of like, I thought I was going to die. I was alone. We were in despair. These are these non-logical, irrational things that you have to express because you went through them, and you have to transmute them and get them out of your body. And when you're transmuting that energy, and the audience and the people are receiving it with you, it makes that experience all the more real, and it helps it transmute that. Maybe you're handing it down to the next generations or whatever. But to your point, a lot of it is just for the sake of doing the thing, but that it's never that empty. It's
right.
It's incredibly important for us to do that.
Well, I think it's not just that. I think it's that it removes you from yourself in a way, or it takes you beyond yourself, which is in the modern world. It's so countercultural. It's like that's a crazy thing. The modern world is, find yourself, go into yourself, discover yourself, express yourself. And, that is, biblically, that is a spiritual dead end. That's hell. Hell is getting trapped in yourself forever. It's horrible. But I'm reading this book right now by C.S. Lewis about reading and about how to read. And it's one of his less well-known books. And he's kind of bemoaning how most people, and he says there's a lot of intellectuals who do this. He's saying it's not just a class issue, and it's not just an education issue. He says a lot of intellectuals do this. He said most people, when they read a book or they look at a painting or they listen to music, in the modern world, mostly they are saying, what do I think about this? How do I feel about this? What does this remind me of? Can I imagine myself in this? And everything is kind of through the grid of me. And he says the first demand of all art is surrender, is to give up on yourself and let the artist, whether or not it's something you agree with, something you would do if you were in that situation. The point of it is kind of like what you're saying about telling something truthful in a imaginary situation is, am I letting the artist take me where he wants to take me? And is it believable, whether or not I agree with his point, so to speak, or his ideology or anything like that? And I don't know, I've been thinking about that so much, this idea of losing yourself, and that this is kind of part of the point of it. And, like playing a game, what's the point of the game? Well, hopefully to forget about your problems and your suffering and to not have to think about yourself so much, because don't we do that enough?
Yep. I couldn't agree more. The willful suspension of disbelief. It's a necessary precondition to a movie working, or a play working, or a song working. I think you said it beautifully, and I totally agree. And I think it again. It's like you need perspective as a human being. To your point, you can't be like lost in your own mind. We need perspective to suss out what is true and what is real. And we go on an experience. We watch a movie. We listen to a song, and we can. If you're secure in yourself, you can completely allow yourself to be taken by the author or the artist. And then when you come out of it, you can be like, man, I like that. That was good. No, that wasn't for me. He was full of it on that one. Like, this is true, whatever. You can come out of it and do that little critique thing. But I think something that when you were talking, I've got this kind of theory that I've been developing for a while. I'm going to run it by you and see what your opinion is on it. Because to your point, it's like you get lost in your mind, and that is hell. And I totally agree with that. And so I think this is a little bit of a Bitcoiner-centric perspective on things, I think. But did you ever see that, man, what was that woman? It was a TED Talk. This woman was a brain surgeon. She was like a neuroscientist.
I don't think so.
I'll shoot you the link, and maybe we'll put it in the show notes or whatever. This is a phenomenal TED Talk, like absolutely transcendent TED Talk. And this woman, I'm going to totally botch it, but basically she's like a brain scientist. And she has a stroke. She ends up going through a stroke by herself in her house. And she knows, she can kind of analyze the experience because she's she works with the brain, and she sort of understands what's happening. And basically she goes and she describes the right hemisphere versus the left hemisphere of the brain and how they interact with reality and what their purposes are. And for her, the left hemisphere of her brain, the stroke was turning off the entire left hemisphere. And so she ended up, and now this is a very intellectual human being, very scientific, the whole deal. And when the left hemisphere of her brain was turned off for the first time, she had an experience of just being fully and completely present to everything around her. And she explains, that the left hemisphere is responsible for the categorization of things. The rose bush is not the tiger behind the rose bush, is not the mushroom growing on the rose bush. It's the part of our brain that separates everything and keeps everything separate and organized and categorized. The right hemisphere is the part that sees no difference between the stop sign and the galaxy that you can see off in the distance. It's all one energy. It's all one thing. It's all God. It's all profound and mind blowing. Everything has energy. Everything has its own frequency. Everything has its own reality. Or I should say, at least is vibrating its own, in its own way. All this is to say that she, for the first time in her life, had this spiritual experience because the left hemisphere of her brain was just completely turned off by this stroke. And for the first time, she felt totally connected to the entire universe all at once, like just pure love all at once, no judgment, no nothing, and she's, and then her left hemisphere would come on in line and she'd be like, oh no, something's wrong. I gotta call somebody. It's a great TED Talk. I'll send it to you. But the point is that, I think that all of humanity is suffering from, I would say we're all becoming leftists. And when I say leftists, I mean left hemisphere dominated.
Okay.
And I think that the analogy actually holds up, if you paste it into the political realm. Peterson had another good point. He was talking about anorexia. And it's really a mental condition whereby you don't have the ability to recognize your own parts of your body within the context of the whole. And so you become hyper focused on this one thing, and it's obviously not healthy. It's not good. It leads to terrible outcomes. And so I think that we're going through this like humanity wide, where we're hyper left hemisphere dominated. We're in our head. We're not connected to, there's got to be some balance between these hemispheres. And this is how you get, I don't want to get too political, but this is how you get people, like I'm going to come up with like 55 classifications for genders or whatever. And it's just like arbitrary and everybody's separate and everybody's completely separate and nobody's connected to anything. Like that to me, that seems like a left hemisphere dominated issue. So I was like, okay, I'm going to like test out my thesis here. I like the leftist thing from a brain perspective. I was like, okay, well, when would this have started happening? And I think that it really started happening in earnest when we invented or discovered double entry accounting. And if you kind of trace things back to the 1400s roughly is kind of when this was figured out, it kind of starts to make sense. And society just started to measure everything. We got used to measuring everything. The books always had the balance. Everything was business related.
Everything becomes quantified.
Exactly. And so we just end up living in the left hemisphere of our brains. And, ultimately it's not good. It, from a creative perspective, it's not good because it's really, you're cut off from the thing that connects you to source, however you want to say it. You're stuck in your mind with your own voice, and there is no there's no anchor to it. There's nothing above it, and that seems like a very dangerous situation. Anyway, that's my
No, that's really interesting. Let's finish a little bit by talking a little more about God and spirituality. You told me that you would describe yourself as a cultural Christian, but you are not quite ready to go all the way. Most of the people listening to our podcast are committed, baptized Christians. What do you think is helpful for people like me who have grown up in church, have kind of spent their lives dedicated to Christ and to serving Him, and are relatively boring, normie Christians? There is, and I think what you are describing for yourself is part of something bigger going on in our society right now. You've talked about Jordan Peterson. You have guys like him, guys like Joe Rogan, where you have Elon Musk at some level, people who are very interested in Christianity. Even I think Richard Dawkins, the famous British atheist, recently started describing himself as a cultural Christian, even though he still doesn't actually believe in God. But he's seeing Christianity actually is very valuable culturally and socially, and it's my heritage, it's my civilization, and there's really good things about it. What has drawn you to Christianity, and what do you think is helpful for normal church-going Christians to hear from guys like you who are searching and are drawn to it?
Oh man. Okay. Really, really, really good questions, important questions. And I hope to answer these correctly. Or at least, you know,
Just answer for yourself.
I want to be as specific as I can. I think they're really important. So for me, I don't know. Do you have a heart out? I can kind of ramble on this for a while. I don't have to leave,
Yeah.
but
I've got about 15 minutes.
okay. So for me, I've never been an atheist. I've never been, you know, I've never rejected the concept of God. At best, I was agnostic. And that really came from me just being, you know, I came from a small town. There wasn't a lot of light pollution. Like, just look up, man. Like, you know, like look up at night. Like, it's really not much more complicated than that. Honestly. And so if you just have some semblance of just any ounce of humility at all, you know, like you just like, okay, there's something going on that's just absolutely incomprehensible, and I have to have it, at least have respect for that. And so I think that's how I lived most of my life. I was anti-religion to the extent that I am against corrupt dogmatic institutions masquerading as Christian or religious. I just didn't like hypocrisy, and I felt like there was a lot of hypocrisy all over the place as a kid, you know, and a lot of that, some of that's indoctrination, some of that's the news, but a lot of it was just kind of my experience of Christians as a kid. I wanted it to feel more open and less cliquey. And the clickiness when I was younger sort of immediately invalidated the whole thing, because I was like, well, if you're all about this, the thing you say you're about, but then you turn around and treat me like this, well then like that's not the party I'm trying to go to, you know, like that's a shitty party. So so for most of my 20, you know, definitely my teens and my 20s, I was just anti-hypocrisy is really what I was. It wasn't until COVID that my lifetime of dominoes kind of started to arrange themselves and fall. And when they started falling, I have to say, it happened very quickly. Like it was like one thing, and then all of a sudden it was like 6 things in one day, and I was like, oh my God, like okay, I get it. I get what they're saying. Like it totally connected. And so for me, Bitcoin was a big part of it. I had to understand, I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but I had to understand entropy. This kind of goes to my frustration with the word creative, because you cannot, like, we're not capable of true creation, right? We can transmute, you know, which is a cool power, like not knocking it, transmutation, fantastic, but we're not, all of this is here already, and we're just rearranging stuff that was already created, you know, from a physics perspective. So I had to understand entropy a little bit to like understand, to sort of formulate my mind around creation itself. Like, okay, you know, I saw, so there was a physics component, but then there was the COVID component of, I saw what people were capable of when they were afraid. I didn't live most of my life in fear. That's not to say I haven't been afraid. I'm just like, that wasn't the main operating frequency that I have come at my life from. And so I just didn't appreciate at all how many people truly operate from a place of fear. And I started to see what they were capable of when they're operating from a place of fear through COVID. And I just, you know, immediately recognized that frequency of fear, that energy that was rippling through society, was profoundly destructive. Like just destructive, like absolutely nothing non-destructive about it. And of course you see things happening in COVID. I saw things happening in COVID. It was just just abjectly and overtly evil. I mean, just, it's not even, you know, there's no confusing the situation here. And so, okay, you go, well, if this polarity exists, then this polarity must exist too. And so I saw what fear was capable of doing. And so I had never asked myself this. It sounds like very obvious in hindsight, but I'd never like really truly thought about what the opposite of love was. You know, people think, oh, the opposite of love is hate, and that's not true, because you can't hate somebody unless you have love there. Otherwise, it's apathy. Right. You know. Right. And so I realized, like, I finally connected the dots. Like, oh, the opposite of fear is love. literally, like in other words, the most creative frequency that I can conceive of is love. And then it made God very approachable, which is to say, like, okay, let's take the abstract out and like let's just look at it from a frequency perspective. Then what is God? God is the frequency from which all things become. Maybe that's an easy way to like wrap my pea brain around something that is as mind-blowing as the concept of as God. So I went, okay, I can get on board with that. Love, God is love, and I don't mean that like in a hippie sense. I just mean literally from a frequency perspective. The frequency of creation is what all things came from. Then I started to realize, and this is a little bit more maybe philosophical, but I realized like, oh, well then, but the frequency of destruction is obviously not on top of creation itself. Like creation is creation. Like all things are subordinate. Like you gotta bow to the king on that one, you know. So then I realized like, oh well, okay, so then the devil knows who's paying his mortgage. Like he knows who he works for. Like this is all designed, and this was my experience. This is my interpretation of the whole thing because I came to God through all of that, and I realized, oh, I was galvanized. I was forced to make a decision in the face of evil about who I am and what I'm doing here and what team I'm playing for, or at least the team I'd like to play for. Maybe I haven't been drafted, but I'd certainly rather play for team creation, for team God. And I just had to ask myself, like, am I here for destruction and pain and suffering and death? No. Well, then what am I here for? The opposite of that. And it's like, okay, wow. Like, okay. And then I realized, and again, maybe you disagree, this is just where I'm at with it. I think that God requires, he can't force you to sign the contract. Like you have to do it of your own conscious will. You have to make the choice consciously to go to do that. So anyway, I'm rambling a bit, but for me, it was COVID, it was Bitcoin from a physics perspective, and then my wife and I were watching Passion of the Christ during COVID, like 2021, 22, something like that. We were just bored during COVID, and we're like, that movie was great. This is how ignorant I was, right? Like I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm like, man, this is just like really good dialogue. I'm like watching it from a film person, and my wife turns to me, she goes, "This is the Bible, you idiot." You know, I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Like Mel Gibson's really crushing it today. Like, no, dude, that's literally the Bible. And so I had gone through enough of my own life experience where the dialogue of this movie, which is coming directly from the Bible, is just so obviously and profoundly true. To the extent that I didn't even know it was the Bible, I'm going, man, that was a good line. Like that was absolutely spot on. That is true. And without knowing that it's the Bible at all. And so anyway, this line happens where, you know, Pontius Pilate's talking to Jesus in the back, you know, and Jesus has this line. He says, "I'm here to bear witness to the truth."
Right.
And I had gone through, there's a bunch of other stuff that I won't get into, but I had been going through like this, my own experience with the truth. What is the truth? How valuable the truth really is. And that's from a Bitcoin perspective. It was from a storytelling perspective. It was from an actor's perspective. It was like kind of like the thing that really drives me as a human being. What I find the most valuable and the most interesting is the truth. The most truthiness truth possible without my brain exploding. Like I want to know what it is. And so Jesus drops this line, and it was the final domino in all of the dominoes, and all of them fall. I literally am standing there with my mouth just like kind of gaping open because it was just this, you know, this whole truth, like I've been on like a truth joke for like 3 months, and then like, bam, it ended with this line. And I came into my office, I started looking up that verse, I started Googling Bible quotes and started, you know, getting into the whole subjective versus objective nightmare that we find ourselves in. So that's a bit of my journey. Really, it comes down to truth. Maybe the more important question is I've had a couple of really, really good people in my life that are Christians that have kind of stuck with me and been willing to engage with me for years. And some of them newer, you know, some of them that you know is how I met you through some of these guys, very good guys. What I would say is what's more important for a guy like me, like it's like lay off the Christianese a little bit
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a Bitcoiner trying to orange pill somebody and like going on and on about UTXOs and a bunch of technical shit. Like it doesn't, like that's for
Right.
later.
Right.
Like engage with the person's attempt to discern fact from fiction, or right from wrong, or truth from falseness. And I would say that probably the most valuable, here's the thing about the truth, right? Like the truth is just sitting there for eternity. It doesn't care what you think about it. It doesn't care what your opinion is. You can sit there and you can punch it and you can huff and puff and try to blow it down and light it on fire and burn it and destroy it. And the more you mess with it and the more you try to push it over and the more you try to break it, the more true it becomes. And so you end up by trying to break it down and trying to destroy it and trying to argue with it, you end up having to submit to it and just accept, like, okay, this thing is not moving. This must be true. Right. And so I would say, to the best of anybody's ability, like try to just be that thing to reflect back whatever the debate or the argument or the concern is. The Christianese, I don't know what it means. I haven't made the jump yet. And so it's kind of just gibberish. And it's like, it makes sense if Christians are talking to other Christians. Like somebody says something, like some Bitcoin comment to me, I'm like, oh yeah, super profound, very true. But if you don't understand, if you haven't gotten there in the first place, you understand the fundamentals of it, it doesn't mean anything. And so for a long time, it always kind of just came off, I don't want to say condescending, but it comes off like just a slightly disconnected. Like I'm just going to regurgitate a sentence rather than being present and walking down whatever path you're on. And the ones that have been, my friends that have really been helpful to me in that context. I mean, they were around when we were arguing heavily about this as teenagers, all the way up to today. And it's always just been like hey, I'm here, I'm around. You want to talk? Let's talk. I'm not going to force anything down your throat. It's kind, again, it's like orange pilling somebody. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort, but it's worth it to do it in a way where I really try not to. I keep it very simple when I'm maybe this is a good analogy. I keep it very simple when I'm orange pilling people. I don't get too complicated. I don't get into the weeds technically. I try to explain the problem. I try to relate that problem to whoever that person is and how they might be experiencing that problem. And I just try to plant a few good seeds, and I let them grow. And I don't bug them. I don't go back, but I'm always there when the seeds start to grow and they start to connect the idea, and they go, oh, this is what that means. This is what that means. Exactly. Yes. A lot of encouragement. And maybe we can wrap it on this idea, because it sort of wraps the whole thing up pretty well. When you're making a movie is a highly advanced emotional manipulation machine. And the people who are making them are very, very good at it. And the reason that we like movies is precisely because I'm not just hammering a sentence into your brain and saying this is the truth. The thing that's useful, the thing that's so great about movies and why they're so powerful is because they get their audience to come to that conclusion on their own, or what they perceive is on their own. Nobody likes being told anything. But if that person can discover that truth for themselves, it's there forever. It's there for eternity. And I think that like the path of self-discovery is more complicated, and it's longer, and it takes longer. But once those seeds start to grow, they can't ungrow. It's a one-way function. You can't come back from those, and it takes more time, but it's worth it. I don't know if that was a helpful answer, but
no. That's super helpful, and I appreciate you being so honest and helping us out with that. I would love to dialogue with you some more about it down the road, and I have some ideas for some books and articles I'd love to hear your thoughts on. But I got to get going. Tell us how people can find you, where they can hear more about what you're up to, and your various interesting thoughts on AI and information and art and movies and God and all these things.
Love it. So the website, the platform is IndieHub.studio. That's INDEEHUB.studio. At IndieHub on X and Twitter, at IndieHub on Noster. I'll be there. We're early. It's beta. We could use your support. Hit me up anytime. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Okay. Well, thanks, Zach. Appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah.
And we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.